You're going to be doing a one-shot at MLW called One Shot. So how did that come about?
Um, it's very funny. I have a YouTube show that I do usually once a week whenever I'm inspired, right? And I like to talk to people I like to interview people occasionally. You know, Conrad and I don't do guests on our podcast, 83 Weeks, but on Wise Choices over on YouTube, I like to find interesting people who are somewhat involved in the wrestling business. Perhaps they were a professional wrestler or in the wrestling business at one point, and then they've moved on to other things in their lives. And I always like to try to find out, how they, transition from this bizarre world of professional wrestling into more traditional walks of life. And there's an actor by the name of Paul Walter Hauser, who is a very, very successful actor. He's doing some things with Marvel and incredible career that this young man has had. But his passion is professional wrestling. And it's funny because we talked about it in the interview. It's like you take a look at The Rock, right? Rock comes in around 96, 77, whatever it was, becomes a huge star in the world of professional wrestling, and then transitions to feature films. Well, Paul Walter Hauser is a huge star, not Rock level yet, but he will be. He's a major star in the world of feature films in Hollywood, but he's using that success to do what he really wants to do, which is to become a professional wrestler and a very successful one. He's very soon he's going to be training and losing a lot of weight and really getting himself in shape because he really wants to be, he doesn't want to just do it once in a while as an attraction. He's thoroughly committed to the art of professional wrestling. So I was talking to Paul about that. I find that to be fascinating and interesting. And in the middle of the conversation, because Paul grew up as a WCW fan. He, as a kid in the 90s, he was very familiar with all things WCW and the NWO. So we're talking about all that, reminiscing a little bit. And Paul says, you should do something again in professional wrestling. You just come back from one night and, executive produce a show. And I said, well, that'd be fun, but I don't see that ever happening. And he goes, yeah, but let me call Court Bauer. Court Bauer owns MLW. He was a former writer with the WWE. I worked with him for a minute. And Paul called Court on the phone live. My show was live. It wasn't taped. Calls Court live and says, hey, I'm talking to Eric Bischoff. I think he should come in and take over the show for one night. Just let him produce the show. I'm thinking that's never good. I would never let somebody do that.
That's what I was just going to ask. I mean, is it just, are you just not being a figurehead? You're actually hands-on with the creative as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, he put Court on the phone live, held it up to the speaker so everybody could see, put Court on the spot, and Court said, absolutely, let's do it. So here I am. And we've kind of started the process already. Let's be real. I'm coming in for one night, so it's not like I'm going to try to, have a major impact on what they've already been doing and continue to do. But from a production point of view, you're going to see some things in that show that you perhaps haven't seen before. And some of it is going to be very subtle. It's not like going to be, whoa, did you see that? But the way I like to thread stories throughout the show, for example, the way I like to treat the very opening of the show, it's a very, very important part of the show that I think gets neglected a lot of times in television, televised wrestling. The way the interviews are conducted, I'm going to have it. It's going to be different. And again, none of these things are going to be like seismic shifts in the way people do things. They're going to be subtle, but my hope is that some of those subtle things that we do, and some of them may be more than subtle, but some of these things that we're going to do at the end of the show, I would just love people to go, okay, I see what he did there. That's pretty cool. I enjoy the show just a little bit more because of that. And if I can accomplish that, then it's a home run for me.
Have you considered for the backstage interviews doing the interview with a backdrop of some roadie package cases and have it really dimly lit and put it on TBS?
It's really funny. If you go back and watch TNA, if you can find it, towards about 2012 or 13, my partner and I, because Jason Hervey was my business partner, and we did a lot. We created a lot of reality shows and worked with a lot of big studios and networks, and we learned a lot. We learned a lot from the world of reality shows and how to integrate some of that storytelling technique into professional wrestling. And one of the things that we did that was so cool, and it had never been done before really in professional wrestling up until this point, but similar to what the scene you just described, where we would do these interviews in locations that didn't look like you would use them for an interview. Backstage in a corner, bunch of equipment, sitting around, boxes for it, whatever. And the lighting would be good, but it wouldn't look like it was a set to be used for conducting interviews, right? And the way we call them on the fly interviews, but what you do is, like, if I was interviewing you, the camera would be framed on you and we'd probably be shooting you at a 45-degree angle or whatever, but the camera would be focused on you. I would be taking you through a series of questions, but when the interview is finally produced and edited, you never see me or you never hear my questions. All we're getting is your reaction to the questions that we're asking. Now, what makes that interesting, and it's a little difficult for people that have never done it before, is if I said, okay, what's your favorite flavor of curry? Instead of you saying, oh, I like yellow curry, or I like this kind of curry, you would answer that question by saying, I've been asked before, what's my favorite curry? I like X. So you're telling the story, but all the attention is on you. And when you're interviewing somebody that in that way, that technique, you get a much more authentic finished product because it doesn't feel stagey. You don't have somebody standing there with a microphone going, okay, Eric Bischoff, you're going to be wrestling so-and-so on Tuesday night. What are your thoughts? That we've seen so many millions of those interviews that people tend to tune them out. But if you can produce an interview that feels like it's an intimate kind of one-on-one conversation, they have so much more impact, especially when you're trying to tell a story or develop a character. So yes, to your question, the answer is yes. And it's one of the things I'm most excited about, because that is a very subtle change. That's not a dramatic overhaul of a television format, but it's a subtle change that over time has a dramatic impact because people feel they connect to the characters in a different way. They feel like they're getting to know the characters. They feel like the characters become, friends of theirs because they're being interviewed in a way that makes them feel more human, and the stories feel more organic. And when you can achieve that, shooting a professional wrestling show or producing one, it's pretty significant. Again, not something people are going to go, oh my gosh, did you see the way they did that interview? In fact, hopefully they don't notice it too much. But what they will feel is that they're more connected to either the story or the character as a result.
Now, when I said that, I think there was an interview with Renee Young on AEW, and there were two girls. I can never remember the names. I'm sorry. I'm terrible at remembering names. Two girls, and they were shaking their titties. And somehow I could still only see the packing boxes behind in the dimly lit sort of just wherever they just plonked the camera. Forget about what I was going to say. Let's talk about production of interviews, because I thought
we were going to talk about titties. Whatever.
I'll tell you, they've got some nice ones there, let me tell you. And they barely moved, even though they were shaking them, so I can't say that they're probably real. But let's talk about the, very specifically, WCW. I'm going to give you a couple of different examples. One thing I really loved when Mean Gene went to WCW, and definitely further on in the Nitro days, is that there was a specific segment where Mean Gene would introduce the person he was going to interview that day. Or it would happen several times in an episode. I always loved that setup to get an interview out there, and occasionally someone would interrupt and then build the story from that interview. Another way I've really loved filming is the old WWF superstars. They'll be standing on a blue platform, if you remember that, and then the backdrop is the fans. Makes it look big time, and then you get instant fan reaction. And a third one, and I'm throwing a lot at you, is when there's a backstage interview but the camera is static. I don't know if this is anything you've ever thought of before, or you agree or disagree, is when the camera moves constantly from person to person or zooming in and out, that sort of distracts me a bit. And I always love the static camera because it's almost more like cinematography, a positive in that respect.
Absolutely agree with you. I think the moving camera is a technique that I don't know where it started or when it became most popular, but it was one of those things that WWE started doing it and everybody else started doing it. And I don't know what the theory is behind it. I don't know what the theory ever was behind it as to why anybody thought that that would be a good way to get people to connect more with the talent that's being interviewed. But I hate it. It is distracting because you're not used to seeing it anywhere else. I mean, you never see anything produced in sports where the camera in an interview where the camera is constantly moving. You want to focus on the talent. You want to hear what they have to say. You want to feel like you're standing there right next to them. You don't want to get vertigo, watching an interview. So I hate that. I hate that technique. I think people are moving away from it now. Now that WWE, there's new ownership in WWE, and a lot of things have changed. Some of them subtle, some of them big. But I think that technique is starting to kind of fade away from the business.
As far as old production goes, let's talk about production of even territories or, AWA 80s, 90s, or even into somewhere around that era that you grew up with that they just don't do anymore that you would like to see come back. I mean, we can be talking about cameras, lighting, angles, anything like that.
I mean, there's really not much, to be honest. In fact, a good friend of mine sent me a video this morning from back in the 1960s in Chicago, a professional wrestling event. And look, they were very, very basic. I mean, three camera shoots, maybe. Audio was what the audio was back in the day because of technology. None of that, I don't think any of that really has a place today. I think people have gotten so accustomed to higher production values that to try to integrate any of the early days of professional wrestling and television, to try to introduce any of that technique would be awkward, for an entire show. Yeah, I mean, I think you could do things, you could do things for a segment. If it's a flashback segment, even though it may be current action, and I'm really just thinking off the top of my head here, I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but one of the things that I might explore at some point in time is if we're producing a segment that has a connection to the past, if it's a nostalgia themed segment, even if the talent is current talent, shooting that in a kind of grainy black and white type footage would be interesting, and affecting the audio so it feels a little bit more like the audio from back in the 60s and 70s. I mean, that's fun, and it draws attention to you because it's different than what you used to see. And I think something like that could be fun. But beyond that, there's not really, I think, anything that we could reintroduce in today's audience.
I was going to suggest one thing is less cuts. Now, I know that since Kevin Dunn has gone, they've really reduced the amount of cuts in WWE, but some of the old school professional wrestling where it's one camera, the hard camera, and it's just there. That's it. No zooming in, no zooming out. Occasionally just following the action, and that's about it for minutes on end. And for some, because I guess I would fall under millennial, because I'm not too far off 40, I guess, then I would still be treated by, I imagine, TV production people as a complete idiot who needs to have 14 cuts every second to keep my attention. But I don't know if it's just an age thing or whatever, but I never enjoyed the cuts, and I've always found like World of Sport or some of the older territories really charming for the just lack of camera cuts. You just focus on the action. Could you even get away with that these days?
I don't think so. I think people have become so accustomed to the fast-paced presentation of everything. Everything, but I hear people talking, I'm not really in the business anymore, so it's not like I have my finger on the pulse, but so often I hear people talking about the attention span of television viewers, and it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And I think part of that is because of social media. There's so much content, and people get so much content on social media, and it's all very short form type of stories and presentations. People are just getting conditioned to get all of their dopamine whatever kind of a rush they get from watching whatever they're watching, but they want to get it quick and then move on. And we've all kind of accommodated that as producers. We're producing now for the short attention span of the audience because, in my opinion, the audience is kind of getting dumber and dumber and dumber. Not the wrestling audience necessarily, but I mean anybody that consumes media today just wants to get in and get out. They don't want to think about it too much. They don't want information that's presented to them that encourages them to think. When people watch television and more social media, they just want to feel. They want that instant dopamine rush. Make me feel angry, make me feel happy, make me feel sad, make me feel fear, which is primarily what you get in social media, is somehow find a way to make me fearful so that I have to come back and get more information so I can become more fearful. That's how you capture people. And I'm with you. I don't appreciate that. And I think what ends up the casualty in that process is the connection to the subject, no matter what it is. If it's politics, you become a casualty because you're not digging deep enough to fully understand both sides of an issue, or all three sides of an issue in some cases, because the information you're seeing is just designed to make you feel something, not think about something.
I didn't ask this you before. I apologise. MLW One Shot. One, what date is it? And two, you are kindly giving your wages, your fee for that day to charity as well.
Yes, it's December 5th in New York. I don't have the information here, but go to the MLW website and we'll find it for you, or you'll find it for yourself. But yeah, it's December 5th in New York City, and I think it's in Queens, New York. So I'm looking forward to that. It's always fun to get back to New York. There's a lot of great restaurants, a lot of things to check out. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, you're right indeed. Melrose Ballroom, Queens, New York, December 5th. There you go.
Thank you very much, Phil. Thank you.
And you are, do you want to mention the charity as well?
Tunnel to Towers. Tunnel to Towers is a charity here in the United States that provides financial assistance, essentially pays off the existing mortgages on homes where if a wife loses her husband and she's got, they have kids and family and obligations, if whether it's a police officer, fireman, somebody in the military service, if they lose their lives serving their country or their community, Tunnel to Towers comes in to provide financial assistance and pay off, in many cases, pay off the existing mortgages for the survivors of that type of thing. So it's a very, very popular charity here in the United States. My wife and I donate monthly anyway, but this was a way to maybe just bring a little more attention to it and a little more money than we typically donate every month.